very warm welcome once again to Hire's weekly webinar. I welcome all of you to this week's webinar on social and emotional learning. For those of you who've been here before, welcome to Hire once again, and we're absolutely delighted that you keep coming back for our events, and we thank you wholeheartedly for all the support and all the love that you've shown us all this while. For those of you who are new to Hire, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Pallavi Dwivedi, and I'm the founder of Hire. Hire is a teacher professional development and learning company, and over the last 5 months, we have now been bringing you learning events, webinars, workshops, live mentoring sessions, as well as lots of interesting resources which we hope have been useful in your classrooms. And we hope we've helped in making the transition to remote teaching easier, slightly more encouraging, and also helped you connect with other educators from around the world. In today's session, I'm absolutely delighted to be sharing the space with some fantastic voices when it comes to looking after the social and emotional well-being of students. Today's session is going to be focusing on that one extremely crucial aspect, which has in the last couple of weeks particularly become a point of great concern, where students, teachers, parents, other school community stakeholders have become increasingly aware, conscious, and perhaps to a considerable degree also perturbed by the kind of social and emotional challenges that the lockdown has presented. What we've been seeing in the last few weeks itself is in very many ways students, teachers, parents becoming incredibly frazzled by an extension of the lockdown, not seeing an end in sight, not being able to understand where we'll go next. So this limbo, this breaking down of known and comfortable ways of social connections, of emotional support. All of these seem to be breaking down in some senses, which can be very discomforting for adults and children alike. How are we going to cope with that in our classrooms? And very importantly, how can we make that a part of not just pandemic teaching, but of teaching in general in our classrooms well after school goes back to normal? What does this pandemic and the challenges that is thrown our way, what does this tell us about how we want to perhaps approach social and emotional learning for our students even after we go back to classrooms? What has this told us about our ability to adapt to change? What has this told us about our ability to reach out to others in times that are unprecedented, in situations that are uncomfortable? What does this tell us about our capacity for resilience? And in what ways are we trying to develop these capacities in our students, even for times to come? So some of these conversations we're going to have today with our wonderful panelists. And as we go into that discussion, let me start very quickly by sharing my screen with all of you so that I can take you through some of the important elements of today's discussion and also introduce you to our panelists. So if you allow me very quickly, I'll start sharing my screen with everybody here. So just some housekeeping tips before we get started. In today's webinar, the panelists are not going to be able to see you. We will not be using the raise your hand feature for this session. We will request you to put in all your questions in the Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screens. This will help us find your questions faster. It'll help the panelists answer your questions in a more easy manner. We'd love for you to use the chat box as much as you'd like, connect with others, talk to one another, discuss things with each other, challenges that you've been facing, things that you've done to help social and emotional teaching and learning in your own schools. But while we're at it, we request all of you to use the chat space with as much respect as you possibly can. This is an open and free space, but we do expect all of you to exercise the necessary discretion. We also wanted to inform you that all webinar recordings, as well as the PPTs that we're going to be using today, will all be made available to you both on our social media as well as to all those of you who registered for today's session. Another gentle reminder, we don't offer any certificates for our webinars. Our webinars are free open learning events, and we don't certify attendance for these. Just wanted to very quickly take you over what we do at Higher in terms of the kind of classroom teaching that we value, that we hope to inspire and espouse in educators around the world. And at the heart of that is Higher's Big Four of quality teaching. We believe that in terms of what is it that qualifies as important competencies that every teacher must have. And these are based on years of lived classroom experiences, as well as massive amounts of education research and classroom research that has gone into understanding what some of these important quality teaching competencies are. The first of these is our ability as educators to be able to plan for classroom delivery. The second is designing instruction. How do we go about designing and delivering what we teach in our classrooms? The third, of course, is managing student progress. How are we looking at the way in which our students are attempting what we're teaching them? How are they sharing what they know? How are we giving them feedback? And the last of these is, of course, practicing professionalism, where we look at our relationships with students, with parents, with our peers, with the wider school community, as well as our relationship to some degree with ourselves. How do we as educators build on our skills and on our knowledge, and how do we then go ahead and become more committed to our role as educators? So that's where Higher comes from when we organize all our events, and these are all organized within this broader ambit of the Big Four of quality teaching. Today's event falls squarely between practicing professionalism and designing instruction, because not only does it talk about how we maintain, develop, nurture relationships with our students and with ourselves, but we also will talk about today how much of that social and emotional support can be built into our classroom curriculum. So before I take up any more time, I'd quickly introduce you to today's panel. I'd like you all to warmly welcome R. Keith Matheny. Keith is an award-winning SEL expert from Texas, United States. He's a public speaker and a very acclaimed author. He's the author of the famous book School Connect, where he talks about social and emotional learning within school communities. We also have with us today Juhi Sharma. Juhi is an entrepreneur and an educator herself. She is the founder of Light Up and Unbottle Emotions, organizations that are working on building social and emotional learning and taking those to schools. She's been working with a lot of schools across the country in helping them solidify their SEL curriculums. We also have with us today Neeru Mittal. Neeru is a Delhi State awardee as an educator. She's a STEM educator and is also a founding Empatico connector. She is also teaching at the SRDAV Public School, and Neeru is committed to conversations around social and emotional learning and has been, in fact, a very, very vocal proponent of SEL and the development of that in school curriculums. So that's our panel for today, and a very warm welcome to all of you once again. I will stop sharing my screen. I'd like to invite our first panelist onto the floor. So if I can invite Keith, and if I can ask him to take our conversation forward today. Keith, I'd like you to get started with what we were talking about earlier and to take that strain of our conversation ahead in terms of what SEL really means in the classroom and what it isn't, and what some of the myths around SEL broadly are. How have we understood SEL? Have we understood it correctly? And if not, how should we approach SEL? So over to you, Keith. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. I'm super excited to be with you. I wanted to just start by saying we are definitely experiencing this enormous storm. We are all experiencing it. And one of the things that I think is important is to remember that we can't truly calm the storm, but what we can do is calm ourselves, and the storm will eventually pass. Maya Angelou said that every storm eventually runs out of rain, and this one will as well. And before I start, I'd like to invite everyone to take a quick, deep, grateful breath. One of the best things we can do as educators is share our calm with students. Students desperately need that. And right now it's a very dysregulating time, and sharing our calm is important. When little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it is so important that we share our calm and not join their chaos. So social emotional learning is built around 5 competencies, and these competencies are research and evidence-based families of skills that are designed to help students grow their emotional intelligence. And you can look at them on this grid of thoughts to actions on the vertical and self to others on the horizontal. So if you look at your thoughts about yourself, that's your self-awareness, being able to know yourself and being able to advocate for your needs. Your thoughts about others is your social awareness, your emotional radar. We navigate a world of people, and the better we are at recognizing what other people might be thinking and feeling, the better we are at navigating this world. Then our actions of ourself, that is our self-management. Some call it self-discipline or emotional management. But this is my ability to make better choices as far as my behaviors and stay on track and be able to manage my emotions so I don't lose control and say or do things that I regret. And then my actions of others is my relationship skills. And this is my ability to select, build, and maintain healthy relationships. And these are skills, and skills that we can teach, and very powerful skills, because life is really all about relationships. Then last but not least is responsible decision making. It kind of builds on those other skills. But these are research and evidence-based families of skills. We're not teaching values, we're teaching skills. And skills need to be taught and practiced in order to be acquired. They can't just be given on a PowerPoint. We actually have to practice them repetitively in different situations. So a couple of facts and fiction about social emotional learning, and I won't read the whole thing, but social emotional learning is a research and evidence-based proactive approach to the academic health, the social health, and the mental health of students. The impact of these skills is far-reaching and long-lasting. Some fiction: SEL is not about fixing kids. It's not about, hey, we're going to fix those kids. Those kids have trouble, let's fix them. No. It's about teaching skills to all children and adults where they can use those skills to transform their outcomes, transform their environments, and transform their communities. SEL is not just for struggling students or those students. One of the things that I think is one of the biggest misperceptions is that our high achieving students don't need SEL. Actually, it's quite the opposite. Oftentimes, our high achieving students are the most of need in social emotional learning, and there are often significant mental health concerns in that population. It is super important that we are teaching these skills to all children as a universal tier 1 intervention. The last myth is that SEL is too costly or too time consuming. The reality is that SEL is a time maker. It's not a time taker. It's not that you don't have enough time to do SEL. It's that you don't have enough time not to do SEL. Every minute you spend teaching a student to manage their emotions with research and evidence-based curriculum is an 11-minute benefit, time on task for students and teachers. Every minute you spend teaching kids to resolve conflicts is an 11-minute benefit, time on task for students and teachers. Because what's happening is if I'm teaching students to self-manage, I'm not spending as much time in managing them. And there's a research article in EdWeek fall of 2015 that talks about that exact relationship. So this is a meta-analysis of social emotional learning that was published in 2017, and you can see the authors at the bottom. But this was a study of 97,000 students getting explicit, evidence-based, high-quality social emotional learning instruction. And what they found is students that had this kind of instruction on average scored 13% higher academically than students that didn't have this. And this was years after the last lesson. If you go down a little further, SEL participants were significantly less likely to have a mental health disorder. Full stop. If that was the only thing we accomplished, it would be well worth it. They were also significantly less likely to ever be arrested or become involved in the juvenile justice system, and had lower rates of sexually transmitted infections and pregnancies. And the benefits were similar regardless of students' race, socioeconomic background, or school location. Basically, social emotional learning works, and it is a research and evidence-based practice, and a research and evidence-based practice worldwide. As Pallavi said, we are definitely experiencing right now a mental health wave. So whenever there is a crisis, there is this physical crisis, or this hurricane or tornado or whatever, and it kind of creates this challenge. And then following that is an economic crisis, this fallout from that challenge. And then after that is always a mental health crisis, as people have been dealing with trauma during that time and dealing with, challenging big emotions. This one is particularly troubling because we have been confined while dealing with those and not having the opportunity to get the kinds of supports that we might have gotten in a different setting. And so we definitely need to anticipate students coming back in the fall, and staff coming back in the fall with significant mental health issues. And as we anticipate this, we need to think about them likely being dysregulated. So one of the things I think that's really important with this understanding is to have the theme of radical grace and patience. Radical grace and patience for ourselves, for our colleagues, for our students and families. It's just a time to really express that. The more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely they are to recover from trauma and thrive. This is the work of Dr. Bruce Perry, and healthy relationships with adults really help students recover. And many of our students have been starved of that healthy connection over the last few months. So I think this is going to be one of the really key pieces, is how can we make meaningful connections with students, especially remotely. So one of the things I've been working with school districts around the United States on is a strategy called the Anchor Point Adult. So the idea behind this is with all the crazy things happening, remote, hybrid, the stormy sea that students are on right now, it's really easy for a kid to get lost and to get disconnected. Well, in the spring, what happened with secondary schools in the United States is they told all the secondary teachers, well, check on your kids. Well, if I was a secondary math teacher, I might have 180 students, in all of my math classes. So doing a meaningful check-in for 180 kids was pretty much near impossible. So I ended up leaving a lot of messages, missing kids. I mean, it was very ineffective. So the idea behind the Anchor Point strategy is that every adult is assigned a group of students, and those are their students. And it's a smaller group. So instead of checking on 180 kids, you check on 20 kids. So for example, you might say your third period is your anchor period, or you might build an advisory period that is their anchor period. But every adult has these 20 kids, and their job is to check on them in a meaningful way to really build that safety, trust, and connection. But beyond that, they're going to kind of see if that student has any significant needs. Are they struggling with accessing technology, or are they struggling with food insecurity? Unfortunately, lots of families that didn't have challenges before the pandemic are suddenly finding themselves food insecure. Are they struggling with mental health or physical health? And your job as the Anchor Point Adult is not to solve those problems, but rather to send an email to someone on your campus whose job is to follow up and provide supports for those specific needs. The job of the Anchor Point Adult is to build a relationship and build a super highway from needy students to quality services. And in a normal system, we would have, counselors and principals and assistant principals doing this, but it's not going to be normal this year. There's just too many needs, and too many needy students is going to require a lot more people in the safety net. The way this strategy would look over the course of a week is every Monday, that anchor point adult would host like a check-in with students where they would do like some kind of circle and say, hey, how are you doing? By the way, there's a video of me teaching people how to do this on my social media. But they check in a meaningful way and create this opportunity for students to support each other. And then they would introduce an asynchronous SEL lesson for that week. So as the teacher, I would say, hey, this week we're studying managing emotions. That's really important today. So really, I want you to check that out, and we'll check back in at the end of the week. Then the students would do the asynchronous SEL lesson on their own, watch a video, do some worksheets, maybe some quizzes and interactives. And then on top of that, there might be some office hours that the teacher might offer that students could drop in a Zoom type setting to check in with that teacher. And then on Friday, the teacher would host a checkout. And they would ask the students, what did you find important from this lesson? What do you disagree with from this lesson? What do you want to learn more about? And how can you apply this lesson? So in order to help teachers, in the spring, I created a whole bunch of flipped lessons that were for free, and we had over 100,000 users. We didn't think that people would need them in the fall, but sure enough, we're here and lots of people needed them. So we created a resource this year called EQ from Home or School. And this is a 1-year asynchronous SEL course that's designed for students, and it's put in a situation that if you reach out and check in with them, it's extremely affordable for a campus and for all students, all families, and all teachers. And this is that asynchronous lesson that the students would then complete, and the teacher would then do the checkout at the end of the week. All right, I just want to say again how honored I am to be here. It's bright and early here in Texas, and I hope that I'll be able to answer some of your questions in the chat. If you're on social media, please follow me on Twitter at Coach Rudy. I share tons of resources there. And again, thank you for what you're doing for students, and I hope you found the first part helpful. I look forward to hearing Naru and Juhi as well. They have some great stuff to share.
Thank you so much, Keith. That was absolutely fantastic. I totally love the idea of doing this this anchor strategy and giving students sort of targeted roadmaps, not blocks, in terms of their understanding their own progression in becoming more aware of their own capacities to cope with social and emotional challenges. And I think that's perhaps one of the most important things that we as educators can do, become facilitators in the development of these meta skills. And I think that something that we've sort of struggled with when we've moved online is, those conversations in the corridors, which really is where a lot of the times teachers could pick up on how a kid is feeling. If you see them sitting separately in the lunch hall, if you see them sort of slouching and walking around, you could pick up on a lot of these visual cues, which otherwise now have become a little difficult to do, right? And also those conversations that used to happen where you could egg somebody on, you could perhaps, when you were watching the kids playing in the field, you could congratulate them later about you observing them playing a game, or you just observing them helping somebody out. All of those small intangibles have somehow, we've removed those because we're teaching online. How do we replicate some of that? How do we bring some of that back in?
So one of the things that I believe is an important strategy is a virtual greet at the door. So just like you can do greet at the door at a good classroom, you can do a virtual greet at the door. So you just open your Zoom meetings or Zoom classes 15 or 20 minutes before the lesson is supposed to start, and you ask students to drop in as you come in. And that way you can one-on-one ask them, hey, how are you doing? Check in on them, make that relationship deposit. This is best practice in the live classroom, and we can totally do that in the virtual classroom as well. There's lots of other possible deposits you can do with students remotely, from You can send them mail, you can make phone calls, you can host, Zoom activities, whether it's a pet parade or a scavenger hunt. Some teachers in America in elementary level, they're creating flat versions of themselves, like the book Flat Stanley. So Flat Stanley, there's a Flat Stanley, and each kid takes the Flat Stanley and puts them somewhere, where teachers are creating flat versions of themselves by taking a picture from this side and then putting it laminated and mailing it to each student, so the student at their local desk can have a flat version of that teacher. Now, I don't recommend that for secondary students, but for elementary students, it's a pretty good strategy. Anyway.
That sounds lovely. Julie, Neeru, would either of you like to talk about that? How do we bring this back in those corridor conversations and informal chats with kids?
Okay, let Neeru speak.
Yes, Neeru, go right ahead.
Yeah, actually, I would like to say I agree with Preet. We should be doing the greet thing. And even like I'm a teacher, a full-time teacher. So when I switch on my Zoom meeting or Teams or whatever, the first thing we do is we ask the students how they're feeling today. Maybe just describe in a sentence, just describe in a word. Okay, ma'am, I'm feeling fantastic. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling, okay, I don't feel like studying today. So that thing gets a connection. We keep on asking, if there's a coronavirus going on, are you okay? Are you keeping well? Are you keeping yourself hydrated, having your vitamins? So these things, they actually make the child think, okay, the teacher is concerned, and there's an emotional connect. And that emotional connect is through which we can actually go forward teaching the students in a better way.
Thank you, Neeru. There's a question that's come in. Julie, I thought maybe if you'd want to take some of these on as well. This one is particularly about young learners who can't express themselves. And Ishita wanted to know, what is it that we can do when young kids who don't, especially your early learners who are dependent on their parents and aren't very accustomed to online settings, how do we reach out to them and gather how they are doing emotionally?
I think art is a great medium, to kind of engage with children and engage in conversations and even play around them. And if the parent is feeling that, okay, my child is not sharing and talking, I think storytelling and art could be a great combination. So some value-based story or something which is around, because parents are also, it's intuitive, right? You're able to sense what my child might be struggling with. So maybe a theme-based story, they could talk and they could follow up with a reflection activity with crayons and colors and, some waste material, and they engage. So children often express through art. And I think it's also a non-verbal way of communicating and showcasing and talking about, okay, I'm stressed. And that would be a great starting point. And then, of course, you will get more cues on how to go about it. And your step 2, 3 will arrive from that.
That's fantastic. There's one other question, and Keith, since you recommended that we should be doing certain things for the elementary or the younger kids, how do we reach out? Are there any specific things that you would recommend for the older students or the secondary school students? Because a lot of the times there are issues with addressing feelings in classrooms for some of the young adults, right, who are possibly not very comfortable sharing everything, because everything is a secret when you're a teenager. Mm-hmm. So how do we address some of those issues?
Okay, so first off, it's really about patience, that you've got to put in a routine that is predictable and safe for students, so they know that routine and they feel safe being able to share. And you start off, what happens is students don't really share that much. They'll be like, I'm a 2, and they'll pass it right along when I use the scale of 1 to 10. And then eventually, as students start to share, it becomes a much safer space. And all of a sudden, about 3, 4, 5 weeks in, you get lots of kids sharing. But the way you do that is by just inviting them to share, but not forcing them to share. So allowing them the opportunity to pass. To say, okay, I'm a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10 and pass, and that's all I want to share. And then all of a sudden a peer will start sharing and kids will show empathy for that peer. And then the next time that student will come back and say, oh, I want to share. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. When I do my circle time period at the beginning of the year, I can get through 3 questions all the way through, and it's 30 minutes, and I can get all the kids in. And by the end of the year, I'm lucky to make it through question 1 because so many kids are sharing. It's all about making that safe, predictable space and having the peers show empathy to the sharer so that the next time more people want to share. I hope that's helpful.
That's fantastic, Keith. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to pause on the questions for right now. Teachers, thank you for your questions. Please keep them coming in. Please put them in the Q&A so that it's easier for us to spot them. The chat is now almost 1 kilometer long. I'm going to have to literally scroll through each of those to find your questions. So just put them out in the Q&A. We'll find them faster. On that note, let me bring on our next panelist. Juhi, over to you to talk about what you're doing with developing SEL skills with Light Up and Unbottle Emotions.
Sure. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, it's visible to everybody. I'll just do a quick check.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, so let me start. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Juhi Sharma, and I'm a young entrepreneur and an educator. I'm the founding member of Light Up Emotions Matter Foundation, which I established in 2017. And my non-for-profit focuses on the underserved population. And this year I decided to enter the private school ecosystem and work with school students and young adults from college. And my second organization is called Unbottle Emotions. What do we do and what's our passion, our vision? And we are a very young organization which is very, very passionate about decoding emotional intelligence through social emotional learning programs. And we do programs for teachers, we do programs for parents, we do programs for students, and I'm going to talk about it, how do we do it. But our sole purpose is to make sure that every child, inclusion of social emotional learning in schools and in a child's life, and in a very systematic way, we have long-term programs. And before I start, I kind of wanted to talk about and decode emotional intelligence with everybody right here also. So I want everybody to kind of remember 3 key words and make sure that you take away this from this presentation, that emotional intelligence and social emotional learning, the very basic fundamental of it is to an individual be able to identify, understand, and equipping oneself to manage emotions. And that becomes like a social emotional skill set for an individual, for a child, for a teacher as well. How do we do it? What's our focus? Our focus is connecting education to emotional well-being, and our primary focus, Light Up, comes at an intersection. So does Unbottle. We work with children. How do we do it? How do we focus and bring back focus on emotional well-being, or for that matter, mental health, also through education? And we follow in the awareness and the prevention space of mental health. So it's not a clinical intervention, it's a intersection between education and psychology. What I really wanted to talk about, and Keith has done a wonderful job in terms of explaining what exactly is SEL and what are the myths and what are the actual facts around SEL. So I thought I will take you to the next step and talk about how can we talk and, you know, apply SEL into our digital classrooms. So as an organization, we also felt that it is our responsibility to kind of come up with something which is very, very relatable and applicable and helpful for teachers and educators and school ecosystems. So we came up with an SEL COVID-19 kit, which is called Rishta Khud Se. So every child is kind of deprived of not being around their teachers, not being in those corridors with their friends. So we decided that we should come up with a kit which can engage students to develop that relationship with self and become more self-reliant, and they go through a learning curve of rebuilding resilience, which is often a missing component in our education system. Of course, every child, every individual, every adult has gone through some sort of anxiousness during the last 5 or 6 months. And I'm sure everybody agrees with me in the Zoom room. You know, we have gone through fear, we've experienced confusion, we've experienced social isolation because our life has been disrupted, and imagine we being adults have been going through that. So children are experiencing at a much higher level because that learn and fun and play and outside schooling system, meeting their friends, everything has been taken away from them, right? And it's going to be a while that schools will resume. So we thought that we should come. One of the few gaps we kind of identified is that SEL has become the new buzzword. It's been there, especially in America. It's been there for a really, really long time, but I feel in India, it's suddenly become the word, the buzzword. So it was very, very important for Keith also to kind of debunk some of the myths. And we also decided that we felt that there's a lot of open-ended content available on SEL. So we decided to stitch a very guided process for students and teachers, which kind of enables them, empowers them. So I'm going to talk briefly about the kit. And I also wanted to talk about, if you are considering as an educator to connect, to research on content, build the content for your own class, these are some of the things that you can take care of to make a very robust and a sound kit which actually reaches a child. The purpose is not to teach the child everything, but it's very important that whatever you're trying to do has to reach the child, right? So our kit focuses on emotional regulation and self-growth. It's high on child motivation. It's through a lot of fun and engaging tools that we've tried to create online. We've come up with WhatsApp stickers also, which are SEL oriented, and we've been seeing very high levels of engagement among students because they love doing that. Then child-friendly instructions. We are focusing on the child to become very independent by accessing this kit, especially for the secondary students. We are looking at both primary and secondary, and it's been divided grade wise. Of course, the prime focus of this kit is emotional well-being during the pandemic, because that's the focus area. So it's very, very important, or whatever SEL engagement that you're planning to do in your class has to be connected to the current scenario. Minimal screen time, because there's already a lot of Zoom interaction happening. Relevant themes, which I'm going to talk about. It also aligns with the SDG goals on quality education and health. And lastly, very important, it requires basic data availability, right? Now, I wanted to also talk about that the importance of having a proper framework when you're planning to deliver EI, emotional intelligence or social emotional learning. It's very, very important to have a proper and a tangible framework, because these are non-academic skills. These are also skills which are intangible. Even Pallavi mentioned about it, and even Keith mentioned about it. So the biggest challenge, I think, for all us educators who are in the SEL space is to have a framework that is able to measure the changes that the children are experiencing, because they happen in very, very small components, and they happen, they're in correlation with incidents on day-to-day basis. So it's very, very important that every teacher and educator, whoever is trying to implement SEL in their classroom, digitally or in person, it's very important that it should have targeted objectives and goals. And what are you trying to achieve? So our kit, we have come up with these 6 components and EI competencies that we are trying to achieve and equip children with. So it's flexibility, it's independence, it's optimism. It's very, very important. India as a country is very, very clouded with a lot of negative news, and which is not being navigated very responsibly in this country. And parents watch it, so it automatically children also tend to consume, be it young or be it elder ones. Then impulse control, because there's so many things which are now being restricted. So of course the impulse level has gone up for children as well as us as adults, right? So problem solving, emotional awareness and flexibility, and most importantly that whole idea of learning with children and with peers and teachers on Zoom digitally. So there's a couple of things which a child has to do it independently. So we focus on these 6 anchors that we are trying to deliver and achieve simultaneously. Now, I also wanted to kind of share 2 activities. Our approach on SEL. Now, SEL can have multiple approaches. You can teach math having a component of SEL. You can also look at art in SEL. There are multiple frameworks again, right? So our journey in our programs, our USP lies in having real life themes, creating activities around it. Of course, we also follow Mayer and Salve framework for that, but we always make sure that identification and understanding and managing assimilation are some of the most few important components in the framework, which we design our activity kit. So we've designed this activity kit. So one of the themes that I wanted to talk about, and I heard Keith mentioning about the scavenger hunt. So feelings hunt is also that activity which kind of helps a child to build that safe space and continuous check on their feelings, so makes you feel comfortable and safe. What is that area in your house, what is that excites you, what is making you feel nervous. So the child is constantly engaged in a self-awareness process, and simultaneously we also give them tools to kind of how to manage and navigate that in day-to-day lives. Similarly, like I said, in our country, how social media and media houses are not the most responsible institutions. So it's very important to find that positive and good news for us also as individuals. So these are some of the activities that I kind of wanted to share of how you can also engage with your students. When you're aligning and designing a theme which is relevant to your class, make sure that's a little intro. Make sure that there are two activities which are delivering on the same thing, a very, very significant component and, content, because it has to be imbibed. It's not that information that goes onto their head and then it goes off, right? So it's very, very important that the child ends up imbibing it. So it's very important it's connected and it's delivered in a stitched in a proper way. So that is why having two activities and a little bit of parent-child engagement, like Sundays, parents can also establish that connection with their child, and it's guided, right? So it's not anything or everything. So it's very important that it has to be connected and guided, and most importantly, reflection, which will give you an idea as educators, as teachers, if you're moving in the right direction. A quick activity, since I am also an educator, I wanted to do with all of you, and since I don't have much time, I wanted all of you, because it's very, very important as teachers, you need to take care of yourself as well, to be that, sunshine teacher for your children, or to be that uh, positive light and make education fun, for them, because studying on Zoom can be tiresome. And they're of course missing, those corridors and school space where they can be themselves and go back to their normal life, which I don't know when will happen. And it's, a question of uncertainty for all of us. So for all of us, we've all experienced this. It's very, very important for each teacher also to take care of themselves. So this activity can be done with secondary, higher secondary students. But even if all of you could do this, divide your mind space into 3 boxes. One could be triggering. Yeah. One second. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to wrap up in 2 minutes. Right? So triggering is something that makes us uncomfortable. It causes us a lot of discomfort, right? Our news has that kind of influence, uncomfortable decisions that we all have to make because our life has been impacted by something or the other. Sleep has been impacted. Some of us in families are going through financial stress, which might also come on the students, right? Learning has been impacted. So these are some of the things where you can either try to ballpark for some time and try and think about it from a very strategic point of view, which kind of is connected to your life. Secondly, able to navigate, like news is something that you can completely avoid. You need not play the entire time at your home. Second box is able to navigate, where of course it's very easy for you to kind of take decisions, but you are in a position that you're able to navigate it, right? So reduce screen time, communication with your child or your partner or with your co-teachers, a little bit of movement and exercise for children as well as for you. Plan and declutter. Wow moments, very, very important to make sure that you feel optimistic and happy. And again, when you start compartmentalizing, your life, your goals, your objectives in these 3 boxes, it just becomes simpler and systematic for every individual, right? You can also take a picture and you can have this access to this slide, and it can help you, and you can do a little bit of activity with yourself. Moving on, other themes that we are looking at the SEL kit, which can help you also: feelings check, how to deal with uncertainty, exam fear because UTs are coming up, self-care, important for teacher, important for students, especially adults, young adults, building a safe space, how can you build an online safe community, what is the kind of vocabulary that you need to build, parent-child bonding, positive online classroom culture, and very rightly make an active routine, because it can be very, very exhausting studying online all the time. I just wanted to end on this note, and I want to ask everybody, what do you think is the purpose of life? I know this is sounding very, very preachy, but I still wanted to go ahead and ask everybody, what is the purpose of life? I just wanted to see a few responses, and I'm unable to kind of see the chat box. And maybe we can take it in the Q&A.
Yeah, we can open this out during the Q&A, Joy.
Yeah, I'll just, yeah. Living, know yourself, be happy, make others happy, peace, self-care, care for others, meaningful to students, make a difference. Okay, so I'm quickly going to share an answer and complete this thing. What is the purpose of life? I just wanted to kind of talk about this. It's your health. And it's not just your physical health, it's your heart ka health, it's your mind health. And because you're all of you are 1 in a million, that means 1 in a million. So if there's no health, there's no physical health, there's no heart, if you don't take care of your heart, if you don't take care of your mind, you won't be able to achieve all of this, what you've been typing in my chat boxes and bombarding. So I just wanted to end on that note, that please, I know there's a worldwide crisis, and we are in a pandemic situation, and we don't know, oh, when is it going to get okay? But I just wanted to tell you that it's very, very important. This will always remain the foundation of your life, your heart, your mind, and your body. So please take care of yourself so that you can go ahead and achieve all of this that you've pointed out here.
That's
So yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much, Joey. What a beautiful note to end on. I think oftentimes teachers, in looking after kids, tend to forget about looking after their own selves. So thank you for reminding everybody about how a happy teacher is the first step to a happy classroom.
Yes,
so
very important.
Thanks a lot for that. There is a singular type of question that's popping up both in the chat as well as in the Q&A, which I thought we should address first up. This is to do with kids who are unwilling to share either by turning their videos on or by sending in audios, or are unwilling to share when you do circle time or when you want to do a kind of classroom discussion around feelings or what they're feeling and so on. I also wanted to make a distinction between social emotional learning and dealing with shy children. Two very distinct things. Social emotional learning is not just about circle time in a classroom. Yeah. It's not just about setting up a space where, an online space where you're going to just ask kids to write down, what does your mood look like today? Can you please insert a smiley to indicate? Yeah. It's much broader and much bigger than that. And it's not something that is achieved through a activity on a Monday, or a discussion on the 4th of July, or a Padlet wall where kids are going to put up little post-its with smiley faces on them. We have to understand that there are two ways of approaching social emotional learning. One is via, of course, a larger vertical school alignment, where we're talking about the mental health challenges that some children face, as well as building these important 21st century skills like resilience, being able to embrace change, being able to be empathetic towards other people. These are not attributes that we can develop overnight.
Yeah.
These take a lot of time.
Yeah.
And perhaps one of the buzzwords, why SEL has become one of the buzzwords today is because there is a skew in our understanding of social emotional learning as simply understanding social emotional learning as how do I cope with anxiety, or
Yeah.
how do I cope with depression, or how do I cope with something uncertain. That is of course a part of SEL, but I want to open this out to all of you to perhaps dissect a little bit more. Keith, can we start with you?
Sure. So social emotional learning is skill development. It's a very broad sense of skills. And by the way, I just want to say, Juhi, you did a fabulous job. So when you're working on social emotional skills, it goes through a 4-step process. Number one, I have to sell it, then I have to teach it, then we have to practice it, then we have to reinforce it. So for example, if I want a student to learn how to resolve conflicts, I have to first sell the concept of conflict resolution as important to learn. Then I have to teach it, break it down into smaller, more dissectable ways. Then immediately I got to take the skill to the drill and immediately start to practice that skill in some kind of setting where they can work on that skill. And then I need to bring it back up at a reteachable moment sometime during the year when they need to solve a conflict. So again, the way you develop a skill, it's not one minute on a 20-minute lesson on a Wednesday. It is something that you teach and sell, and then you practice repeatedly, and then you reinforce. This is why it's so important for the classroom teacher to own these skills rather than have somebody dropping in to teach it that doesn't own the skills, because the classroom teacher has the relationship and the opportunity to reinforce it over the course of the year.
Thank you for that, Keith. I think the reinforcement angle is what is the most important one here. It's not just about that one conversation that you want everybody to participate in. And also, I feel that, when we talk about kids not sharing or not opening up, Juhi, would you want to address that?
Yeah, so I have worked with children who've gone from being completely not sharing, and then eventually they've become comfortable and they've become open to talk about things. So I think the foundation, like the basic issue is around trust. Why is a child not willing to share about it? Because there's some sense, and it's like the energy, right? You can't really define it in a very like a tangible component, but it's just that feeling of not feeling comfortable or just safe enough. So it's very important for everybody to even create safe WhatsApp groups or Zoom sessions and have that little component. One has to be A, very consistent, B, very patient. These changes take time. These are behavioral changes, and a very systematic inclusion of it in your day-to-day practices. It doesn't have to be that, like you said, one circle time. That is why we've come up with 15, 20-minute and 40-minute activity on one day where they can do that in the circle time, but a 15-minute activity on like a Monday also, which is like an introduction. So that connectivity, that systematic decoding of each subject, like how even Keith mentioned, it has to be reinforced, it has to be reapplied again. And there are students who might not even understand. So very innovative and creative ways to go back, engage, and make sure that it's being constantly provided. So I think you were also asking about that cheering thing in the opening. So we started opening every session with music, motivational and fun music, and that's become the highlight of the Zoom session. These are not Bollywood shady songs or like hip hop R&B songs, but nice and fun and motivational songs also, which is around so it just becomes a nice way to open up a class, and they're motivated to come. Okay, there's a music jam session on, and you can carefully curate that playlist. That also became like a high engagement factor, and I wanted to share because it's worked in our sessions. And everybody's motivated, they'll send their suggestions. So just like a small suggestion, you can definitely introduce music in your Zoom sessions. I think it's going to be a hit. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Juhi. And I think one of the important things that we need to segregate is classroom engagement and social emotional learning. Kids not wanting to turn on the video in your classroom has more to do with their engagement with the content than having an issue with being socially responsive. we should try and avoid conflating or confusing the two things. Oftentimes children are reluctant to turn on their videos or don't want to share, like Julie said, but if we're talking about kids not turning their video on first thing in the morning, well, yeah, probably they were Netflixing the whole night long and they probably just woke up 5 minutes before your class. So that has, we should try and find ways to engage kids, both within classrooms, for classroom content or your everyday teaching, and build our social and emotional learning into that. Just because it doesn't turn their video on, or just because they don't turn their audio on or don't participate, shouldn't always be read as the child being socially and emotionally disconnected. They could just be disconnected with the content of that.
And it will eventually happen. Once you start doing little bit of engagement, it's difficult to have that kind of engagement in first week or first day. And you can be okay, you can say it's okay to keep your video off. Maybe let's not put our video on and just normalize that. And maybe you give them that comfort, because I know there's so many even young college students who are just so uncomfortable to come on video because there's so many other issues which are in the back of their head. They might have body image issues, they might have other issues, so it could be a lot of that also.
I have two things to share there. So one to share, there is a setting in Zoom where they can turn off self-view. And some of my students have found it much more comfortable when they can't see themselves on the screen. So that's a possible strategy that you might use. It makes them less self-conscious. But the other thing is what Juhi just said about, they're not going to naturally just share right away. You've got to create this predictable, safe space, and you've got to be willing for them and for yourself to be bad at it before you're ever going to get good at it. If you're going to learn how to play, the clarinet, you've got to honk for a while before you can ever play clarinet. Your students are going to have to honk at sharing emotions for a while before they can ever play. But if you give them time and make it safe and predictable, they will get there. It will become a beautiful space.
Thank you for that, Keith. And on that note, I know we're running out of time, so I'm very quickly going to hand the floor over to Neeru, who's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the tech tools that she's been using to develop social emotional skills in her students, particularly while we've been online. So Neeru, over to you for that discussion.
Thank you, Pallavi. And so now I'm actually really going to show you how I practice social emotional learning in my class. And here I'm going to share some activities. I'm going to make it very quick because we are out of time, as I've been told. Just a second. Okay. So with all this talk on what is social emotional learning, and we all know that everyone, I think most of the panelists have discussed about what is social emotional learning. So I'll just quickly go through this. In a classroom, as a teacher, I'm concerned with how do I actually go about it. I know social emotional learning means self-awareness, it means self-management, it means relationship skills, it means social awareness, responsible decision-making. These are all 5 core competencies which are supposed to be there in students so that they can develop their self skills. But how? I mean, how do we do it? So what actually research has found out is that there is a happiness skill set. We have been seeing this. If you're happy in your class, if you are connected in your class to your teacher, like when we were younger, when we were young and we were attending school, there used to be moments of real happiness in class. We used to want to go to class, want to meet our peers, want to talk to our teacher. Why? Because you were really happy in the class. And there is a happiness skill set, which actually helps, incorporate these self competencies, which we have all been talking about, all this self-awareness and all this jargon. So what are these happiness skills? I'm just going to discuss some of them here. We have human connections, we have gratitude, we have kindness, mindfulness, purpose, positive outlook. All these are basic competencies, happiness skill set, which map onto the self competencies. So here, what I'm going to show you are some technology tools which you can use in your everyday class, and especially during this time of pandemic, when you cannot actually physically be in the class, you can use these tools with your students maybe once in a week, once in 2 days, once in a fortnight. So the first thing which you can do is, I'll be telling you about the tool very quickly. You can create a gratitude wall. Now, what is a gratitude wall? It is basically, you can ask students, it's an activity where you can ask students to think of 3 people who have really helped them and whom they're thankful to. So the students can recall that, and the students can record their thankful, thankful feelings onto a Flipgrid, which is a free online open source tool, which you can use very easily. Simply go to the tool and the student can record it, and this recording can be shared on a daily or a weekly basis. What happens is, I'll just show you how it works. What happens is when students can share their gratitude stories, their gratitude feelings on a single platform, these things can be shared with other students, and then they form a habit of being thankful. Being thankful is connected to being happy. This all of us know, and I don't think so we need to prove that. So being thankful is developed gradually. Take up this activity for every week or every fortnight, whatever form you want to have it, but you must have it. So I'll just show you an example where I have created a gratitude wall, and my students have shared their feelings in this wall. Let me just show it to you. Just give me a second. So here, this is the gratitude wall, which I was talking about. It's a very simple tool. If you even go to Google and just type Flipgrid, you'll get the tool. It has a place to put a message, and then these are the responses of my students. The student simply has to go and click here. You have to share the code. There's a code here which is generated with every wall. You simply have to share this code, and the children will go and record a response. So let me just show you one of the responses. These are the students' responses which I have got. And here it goes. This child is thanking all the doctors, all the teachers during the pandemic.
Neeru, we're not able to hear the video.
Oh, okay, I think, just a second. Wait, just a second. Do you want me to do it again?
If you could just share the link to that, perhaps we could go back and visit it. Is that going to be possible?
Yeah, the link is here. It's in the, yeah, you can just go through. And it's a very interesting tool. Like you can simply go and find this tool on, you just simply type Flipgrid and you'll get this tool. I think I'll have to share with my audio. Right. Okay, now let me just go forward. So the next thing which we can do is we can maintain a kindness diary. Like my students, they maintain a kindness diary, which chronicles their little acts of kindness. There can be any act. It can be as little as helping a peer do his homework, maybe helping a child who has not brought his pencil or maybe his stationery, to help the stationery with the stationery, maybe to help some peer who is not feeling well go to the washroom. As simple as that. Or maybe helping, to bigger things like helping a person cross the road or a child with water. So whatever the students they do in their daily life, I think all of us, we do lots of these things. And on an average in a week, everyone does at least 15 to 20 things which can go into the kindness diary. So when a child maintains a kindness diary, he or she gets into the habit of being kind to others, because this kindness diary activity is something which is again shared in the classroom. Like what I do is every month I have a class and I share this using the presentation. Right now during the pandemic, we can share it using a number of online tools, and the students, they can see others recordings of their kindness diaries, and they are motivated to also write their own kindness stories. So they also try to help others. So again, we're developing a skill where we're being kind to others. This again leads to happiness, and this is the kind of happiness which is actually true happiness. So here, this is the kindness diary, and what I have used here is a Sway. Sway is again a tool, a free online tool. Again, you can simply type Sway, create your account, and start doing this. It is like a PowerPoint presentation. There is no music or some sound here, so I can just show the diary here. And you can see how it looks like, how a sway looks like actually. It's a Microsoft tool. You don't need to have anything, you just need to have an account, that's it. So this is a kindness diary of one of my students whose name is Rhythm. And she has written this. This is like a presentation. This tool is there online free. She simply has to add cards to it and start writing. Like she's put something here on a certain date. She's helped an old lady trying to cross a busy road across outside her school. And there are others also here. You can see this. Now this tool is shareable. It is a collaborative tool. You can have a single kindness diary for all your students, or you can have a diary for each student as you wish. So then we come back. The next tool which I would like to discuss is Skype in the classroom. Many of us and many of you might be using Skype in a number of ways, but as teachers, we can use Skype to maintain positive relationships in our class. We can use it to connect our classrooms to global educators, to global classrooms across the world, and build some positive human relationships. How? We can set up a class for cultural exchange. Maybe during the pandemic, in fact, we have already created so many connections with people, with teachers in Spain, and with teachers in Italy, with teachers in Russia, and even in India. So what happens is, when students, they connect with each other, when they connect with their peers from across the world, they come to know about the global problems. They come to know about how life goes about in that part of the globe. So there is a feeling of empathy also which is developed when we use Skype, or when we use some sort of video conferencing tool. Now, why should I use Skype? Skype gives me Skype in the classroom rather gives a number of opportunities to set up classrooms for lifelong learning. Like you can have classrooms which specialize in sessions on aquariums, classrooms which specialize with sessions on museums. Maybe you want to visit a wild park somewhere in the US, sitting right here in India. Like once my students visited the home of Abraham Lincoln, and it was a completely life-changing experience for them. So all this you can do with your classroom and using Skype in the classroom. You can also set up global projects. Why I'm saying global projects? Because global projects are usually aimed at addressing global problems. So you have a number of things when you come to using Skype in the classroom. You can have relationships, you can have empathy, and you can have this feeling of being globally connected and becoming global citizens. So for this, you can use Skype in the classroom, not the regular Skype. You have to use a Skype connection. You must have a Skype connection that is free. All of us know that. And Skype in the classroom is basically a community of teachers. You simply have to sign in using any of your accounts, maybe your Google account, maybe your Microsoft account, and you have a host of activities. Let me tell you, once you are signed in, once you are a member of Skype in the classroom, like this is the page, my profile page here. This is a photo of my class. I use it to connect with students of rural areas. And here I have, can you see this thing called miles? This is how much I've traveled virtually. Fine. And this is during the pandemic. So you can visit places virtually, and you can have this, the students can have this feeling of visiting places virtually, and visiting Egypt virtually. I've traveled to Egypt today, and this the good feeling of happiness coming into students, a feeling of achievement, a feeling of having done something. So we also have activities. If I simply click on this activities tab here, we have a host of activities. As I was telling you, I can have virtual field trips. You can select from what you want to go to. Suppose if I just want a virtual field trip, I can simply click on virtual field trips, and I'll get a host of virtual field trips. Virtual field trips is basically, there are people in that part of the world. For example, if I click on visit the Egyptian Museum, so this is a virtual field trip which has been organized by teachers only, and sometimes guides. We don't have to pay anything for that. We simply have to request a session, and the children can actually visit this in 3D. using AR, and it's really wonderful.
Neeru, just a
Really
reminder
wonderful.
to open
Yeah.
floor for questions, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So that was the last thing which I want to tell you. And the last thing which I want to really today stress upon is, as Juhi also mentioned and as Keith also mentioned, if we are happy, students are happy. So there's an app which has been created, Hacking Happiness. This app has got a happiness index in which you can actually find out how happy you are. There is a questionnaire, and depending on the answer of the questionnaire, there is a suggestion of activities which you can carry out so that you can become happy. There are tips for a happy classroom. There are tips for how to be happy yourself. That means happy teacher tips, happiness surveys, happiness tools. So be sure to download this app. There's a link given here in the window, and just try and use this app. In the end, I would say I would just put in this some interesting equations, which I think all of us as teachers believe. If we have a happy teacher leads to a happy classroom. A happy classroom will always lead to happy students. And if we have happy students right from the beginning, they grow up to become just, peaceful citizens. So creating happier classroom will go a long, long way to create a happier and peaceful and sustainable world to live in. So we must start from the grassroots levels, that is from our own classrooms. Thank you.
Neeru, thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. So many wonderful ideas and such great tools to be able to implement all of these ideas. Thanks a lot for that very quick virtual field trip almost through all of your apps and all of your lovely resources. Thanks a lot. Thank you, panelists. I'm just very quickly going to wrap up with one last question, which I believe was triggered right after our last Q&A, where teachers really want to understand how is it that we can recreate some. So with the older students, some of these activities are perhaps done in an easier or a simpler manner. How do we integrate a lot of what we talked about today with the younger grades? How do we do this with the primary school kids? How do we do this with the early years? And there's one other very interesting question which was about markers for emotional well-being, particularly for the younger ones. So Juhi, would you want to start with that? Juhi, you're on mute.
Markers for younger students or adolescents?
Why don't you talk about both?
Okay, I think for elder students, because I know it gets a little discomforting for adolescent students to, the teenage comes in and they start keeping their own, they start keeping things to themselves. So I think sharing could be one of the markers, right? How are they managing? Of course, I think impulse is also something very, very important. That is kind of because we are going through a lot of changes and we are confined in four walls. So I think that is also one of the markers that is important. And then I think from sharing, if they're coming in, they're communicating the kind of vocabulary that you're using, and parents and teachers be able to kind of figure out that where is this heading. So are they having some really, really challenging issues, because some of them also don't have very happy homes, back at home. So that kind of becomes very, very traumatic for adolescents, and then that can lead to potential much, much deeper issues in the long run. So I think that is very important. And how responsibly are they taking up challenges? Are they completing their task? Could also be one of the markers, because they are also very, very distracted with other things. So their attention, how are they managing? Are they completing their task? And again, the whole shy component could also be, and not term it as a shy component, but just normalizing certain things as per their age. You call that Gen Z. So trying teachers could also kind of adapt to that. And I think that's a great icebreaker for teachers to kind of get along when you start talking in their language as well. So some of these markers, I would say, that would be for elder students. And younger students, like I said, for younger students, it has to be a lot to do with how they're expressing themselves. So expression could be because children they can be like molded and they're very free spirited when they're young and they don't have filters. So that could be one of the markers for them. And how again impulse is very, very important. Decision making won't really work around, but are they becoming independent learners, or are they dependent on you and parents and teachers only? Are there some components that you can look at that they can build at an independent level? So three markers each. Yes. Not
Fantastic.
going talking
Thank
a
you
lot.
so much for
But
that.
thank you.
This
Yeah,
was
and thank you.
absolutely amazing. Panelists, thank you so much, both for breaking down a lot of the myths around SEL. I felt that that was perhaps one of the biggest takeaways for me from this session, and I'm hoping that it's been the same for everybody else as well. Thank you for also putting out in very practical senses what SEL should look like in classrooms, what it shouldn't be confused with, and also Niru, towards the end, for that very hands-on tool guide or toolbox, if I may call it that, for actually designing some of the SEL activities that both Juhi and Keith have talked about in terms of a wider framework. So thank you to all three of you for today. Thank you to all the participants for the fantastic questions. There were some amazing interactions in the chat. This was so wonderful to witness. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Keith, for joining us so bright and early. Thank you, Juhi, for all the wonderful insights into adolescent brains particularly. Thank you, Niru, for that toolbox. And everyone, we look forward to continuing this discussion on our Facebook group, where this video will be available even later on for you to go back and go through some of the chats and some of the questions that people on the Facebook group have posted. And panelists, please feel free to engage with the conversation there as well. So we'll see you back here, everybody else, with a new set of panelists next week. We'll keep you posted on that announcement. And thank you once again to all panelists for having been here today.
Thank you, Pallavi. Thank you.
Fantastic.
And it was nice meeting Keith and Niru. Yeah. And
Same here. Learned a lot.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a lovely week ahead. Keith, closing.
Yes, I just wanted to close by saying to everyone that is here, students need you so much this year, and probably more than ever. And you make the difference. Every child needs a calm, connected, caring educator. You are so important. Please engage in this work. Curriculum doesn't teach, teachers teach. Good luck.
Fantastic. On that note, thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful week ahead.
Bye-bye.